Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 558, Easter Eggs. Monday, September 9th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. We spend a lot of time in the agency world bemoaning the in-housing of agency services by clients. But maybe it's not the problem we believe it to be, and that with a small change of perspective, it might be a collaborative goldmine. Tonight, we'll discuss. Also, navigating the yin-yang of influencer effectiveness, the impact of negative AI interactions, a look at recession advertising, plus the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal consultant at strategy consultancy Future Forth, the one and only Mr. Dave Delaney. Hi, Dave.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Great to have you on the program. Now, also with us, we welcome back the Admiral of the HMS Beagle and author of a ton of books, including his latest, Built to Suck, Mr. Joseph Jaffe. Hi, Joe.
Ahoy there, Norpy.
Ahoy.
Ahoy. You're like ahoy.
It's like something from Stranger Things right now.
Indeed.
And finally, he's an associate vice president of marketing strategy at Arizona State University, as well as author of the new book, Specific. Say hello to Mr. Adam Pierno. Hi, Adam.
How are you? Great to be back.
Well, we've got a lot to cover this week, some big meaty topics. And first up, we saw a lot on this. We talk a lot on this show and within the industry at large about the challenges that face the agency model, especially the challenge of in-housing. That's where the client will in-house creative services or some other agency service. But an opinion piece in Adweek challenges the notion that the problem is with the brands engaging in the practice, instead positing that agencies are in the wrong business model. Joe, the author says we need to get out of the agency business and get into the outcome business. Now, I know that's kind of a buzzy phrase there. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that exact description, but what's your take on that premise, the basic premise behind what he's thinking in, and does it make sense to you?
You know, I wanted to love this topic so much, and I love the topic, but the article itself was a little confusing. It was written by the CEO of OMD Worldwide, and so obviously there's a lens, right? There's a filter, there's a lens, there's a bias. It's a thought leadership piece, and I tried to get through it without any biases whatsoever. So I'll talk about the premise of the article and of the topic, because I think it's an important one. And so the author, he cites one of the most classic pieces written by Theodore Levitt in a Harvard Business Review article, and he really talks about this idea of moving from product-based solutions to something that's much broader, to customer needs. I mean, it really was one of the seminal pieces that spoke about being customer-centric. And the example is the railroad industry. It declined not because, well, it declined because customer needs changed, right? People started moving to other forms of transportation. And the problem with the railroad industry was that they said we were in the rail business or the railroad business as opposed to the transportation business. So that's the backdrop for the author saying the problem is that agencies are saying we're in the agency business as opposed to the outcome business. I don't think that the problem is that the agencies are in the agency business. I think the problem is that they're in the advertising business. I don't think there's anything wrong with being an agent or having agency on behalf of a client. I think a consultant, I think any partner can be a really great agent. And I'm not trying to just mince words or kind of play with nuances. I think first of all, we have to be able to call it what it is, which is the problem isn't the agency business, it's advertising, it's the business model. And I think to his credit, he does talk about the business side of the agency business. So what does it mean? It means that ultimately the way agencies are compensated is ultimately going to determine what business they're in. And of course, any agency is going to say we're in the outcome business. It really makes me think back to the Mad Men days. I remember that episode so clearly with Don Draper, where he sells Kodak on the carousel, on Dreams, and talks about the slide projector and this product. But ultimately, what agencies did in that day and age is they solved problems. They really were outcome focused. They were able to change businesses and really move those metrics. And so the problem here is that agencies have forgotten that. And I'll just say one other thing. Why I got confused in the article was, there's a blurb on talent and a blurb on technology and a blurb on process. But ultimately, all he was really talking about was kind of like, his moan or his beef was on marketers actually moving their agency services in-house. So it's almost like it was the right idea, but the wrong execution. And I think, and I'll turn it over to you and to the other panelists, really, the business of advertising, the advertising business, it's exactly the kind of topic that we need to be talking about right now. But until the business model, and with the business model, revenue streams and compensation changes, agencies will never be in the outcome business. They'll just be in the widget or the output business. Output, not outcome. We need to move to outcome instead of outputs.
None of these ideas are really new. Someone else was going to say something. Go ahead, Adam. I think it's Adam.
Oh yeah, it was me. Did you think that you're right? He brings up the critical issue, but then he makes it tactical instead of really talking about how do we get there when he refers to the technology and the platform. I thought he was going in the right direction, and I didn't know the author when I started reading it. I clicked through at the end of the article, but I thought for sure he was selling a technology platform by the time I got through with it, because his solution is kind of like, let's get everybody on a platform where we can see results. And to me, that's, digital dashboards, I don't think are the answers to the results business. That's the metrics business.
Yeah, I mean, none of the ideas that are being expressed in this article are necessarily new. I mean, everybody here has heard of Madison Avenue manslaughter. I mean, you're all familiar with Michael Farmer's work. You have to have been, because it's like so much of the industry has been captivated by talking about that book. But, in the process of writing that book, he only was drawing upon something that he's been telling the agency world and consultancy for the past 20, 30 years. It's, basically that the model is broken and that it's not based on performance, that somehow we don't want to be associated with the performance of our products. We just want to be associated with the idea and the creative and the awesomeness of it. And, that makes us into something less useful to the client. And that's why we're being attacked from all sides. And that's why we're losing ground with our clients. It's mainly from the standpoint of not being able or willing to be responsible for the actual product performing in the marketplace.
I mean, I just want to say that, that if the problem, of course, is that, and we've discussed this on the show so many times, marketers or clients don't trust agencies as much as they used to. They're not sharing data as much as they should.
But they've never done that. I mean, it's just like I can remember back in the early '90s being asking for the data. I mean, we're a database marketing agency. We're handling all of this, and we still weren't getting all the data that we needed.
Right, but now more than ever, I mean, it's become a data-driven. Here, my point is, when an agency turns around and says, don't, pay us just cost, and we will not make one dime of profit on this business. Every bit of profit we make will be performance-based and outcome-based. That's when we'll move from being, from being an agency model to an outcome model, and not before.
I'm not sure I totally advocate for that anymore. I mean, I know that these ideas have been around for a while, and I describe very heavily to a lot of the thinking that Michael Farmer puts forth in his book. But at the same time, you can't be entirely responsible as an agency for the performance of a brand. You can only be responsible for the ad's performance. And that gets tied up into all kinds of variables that you can't really control. Like, is the product broken? Is there, bad fulfillment on the client side? Are the store displays not working? Are the other agencies falling down on the job? I mean, there's so many variables that can affect your performance that it makes it for a lousy way to go. I thought probably the more interesting aspect of this article was not the performance side of it. It was more about this collaboration with the in-house agency. That if a client creates an in-house agency, you shouldn't fight it, you should collaborate with it, and that it's a potential goldmine of opportunity for you to show forth what kind of collaborative consultancy you are as an agency, as opposed to just some vendor who delivers creative. And I think that for me was probably one of the more salient points that stuck out. How about the rest of you? I mean, how do you feel about that idea that somehow you can work collaboratively with an in-house agency to develop the creative product or develop the strategic outcomes, that you can work on the data processes together in a collaborative fashion? It sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, it sounds good to me. Great. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no. I mean, I think it sounds great. I mean, for me, and from reading the article, which I also found a tad confusing, the way it was written, I believe that, the outcome has to be quantified. And that's something that I'm not sure if that might have been missed in the article about, actually measuring outcomes to prove what's working and what's not. What doesn't get measured doesn't improve. So.
I mean, is it reasonable, Joe, to expect for an agency to ever get to a place where they feel like they can collaborate with the client's in-house agency at that kind of level? I mean, it would take a dramatic aligning of priorities within an agency, a typical large agency, to say, we're going to treat the in-house agency as just another resource that's going to be part of our team and that's developing part of the ads, part of the strategy, part of everything. And we're going to lead it up as this kind of master agency who's providing the overarching structure and consultancy value to the entire relationship. I mean, that sounds like that could work, but would an agency ever be willing to do that? Would a client ever be willing to do that?
Look, if you read between the lines, what this article was basically saying is when it comes to talent, technology, and process, an in-house agency can never go toe-to-toe with a large, established, multinational conglomerate or behemoth of a network. And so if you just put that aside for a second to answer your question, I think when an agency does play nice and work nicely with the in-house agency, it's almost the beginning of the end. You've almost kind of admitted defeat. But on the other hand, if this article is right, there's, as the old saying goes, people rise to the level of their own incompetence. And if the in-house agency is nothing more than an output-based functionality, then the agency, the external agency, must and has to differentiate itself by being outcome-based. And that becomes your dichotomy, outcome versus output, where one is, entirely tactical and the other one is completely strategic. And each one will have a different set of measurements and metrics and KPIs, and therefore compensation.
But it makes a big assumption, though, Joe, because that, according to that logic that you just laid out, which you're doing the author quite a favor explaining it the way as eloquently as you just did, but it makes an assumption that the in-house agency will be accepting of strategy or expertise from outside, when in fact the internal agency is managed by a team of people that consider themselves experts. That, you know, the in-house agency is not thinking, and this is from someone who works on one, we don't think of ourselves as, oh, we're second tier, and so when we have to go get the agency to tell us what to do, it's we look around and say, oh, okay, our talent's pretty good. We feel really strongly that we know our business better than a vendor or a partner could, and we bring them in for certain times. So it just becomes a challenge from the outside of, is that really where you think you can win, convincing the CMO that all the people that he or she has hired are, you know, tactical delivery mechanisms? I'm not sure that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the only hopes for, you know, the incumbent here is that, you know, ultimately when you work for an in-house agency, you are a small subset of a different machine, whereas when you're in an agency, you're part of an, you know, the entire company is an agency as opposed to being a department or a subset. And so from a talent standpoint, I mean, this is the hypothesis, which is toe-to-toe, an in-house agency will never be able to match the talent of an external one, or at least be able to retain their talent. It does really come down, and this is kind of, you know, talent technology. I'm not really sure about process, but certainly when it comes to the ability to win on talent and technology, in a perfect world, you would have to believe the external agency would be able to be differentiated and a bit superior. But of course, you know, just when you thought it was safe to get back in the waters, along comes, you know, the Deloittes, the KPMGs, the Facebooks, and the Googles. So, you know, from the frying pan into the fire.
Right. Well, are the in-house agencies the true? This article makes another big assumption, that is the in-house agency is the cause of the decline of agencies. But I think those other opponents that you just named and many more are the real, you know, it's that they're getting nibbled to death by dogs.
There are so many factors involved with why agencies are suffering right now, and I think that in-housing is probably one of the least. I mean, there's so many factors, most of them of their own making. I mean, just poor abilities to price out jobs and make sure that you're getting compensated fairly, and then the battle with procurement, and there's so many factors involved with it. But before we move off this topic, something that Joe said really resonated with me, and I want to, you know, just kind of rephrase it and ask the question: can agencies hope to remain relevant in a world where they no longer sell ads but rather sell results? I mean, if you're just being that Uber overlord of all the creative output and the Uber overlord of all the strategy, and, you know, you have an in-house agency doing most of the work, eventually the agency becomes irrelevant in that model, right? No matter if they focus on results and not on delivering a product, what are they actually there for? Nobody wants to tackle that.
But doesn't the product lead to the results?
Products do lead to the results, but if you're not delivering the product anymore, if you're an agency and you're concerned with the results, you're not necessarily delivering ads anymore. You're not necessarily even delivering strategy. What you're doing is overseeing the production of the advertising. You're overseeing the strategy development, no matter where that comes from, whether it comes from internal teams at the brand or you're doing it from a standpoint of whatever resources you have on your behalf. But it kind of defeats the whole purpose of the agency having some kind of relevancy to be in this outcome-based model entirely, as opposed to being a seller of ads, right? Am I missing something, Dave?
I'm on the same page as you are. Yeah, I agree with you.
And I would just add one point as well, which is, and this is why, you know, you've got to look at the actual business model of the agency business. And so if this is about, it's not just results, but it's about an outcome, and that outcome has got to be a mission critical outcome. We've got to be talking about, you know, what the three drivers that any CEO cares about, which is customer intimacy, growth, and competitive advantage. And if an agency can, goes back to my previous life with evolution, which is if the agency is bringing startups that are that have an MVP, that are on brand, that can absolutely solve industry or company headaches or massive challenges, and can package that and sell that and create a collaboration approach for that. Not dissimilar, by the way, to what Anomaly was doing when Anomaly was set up, where they were creating standalone products or independent solutions and then figuring out how to sell that to a client or get the client to invest. But until we can actually look at a very different paradigm and a very different operating model, we're not going to see. It's just going to be kind of lip service. And as I said, this article, sadly, and it's not really the author's fault, it's indicative of the problem in the industry, which is right now the agency, even though they understand what to do, they are literally scrapping for their lives. It was a year ago we were talking about the consultancies and the technology companies. Now we've got a third enemy or opponent, and that's the in-house agencies. It's now 3 times harder, or exponentially more like 9 times harder, just to kind of be competing on a level footing.
Well, it's not going to get any easier, and that's pretty much the way that we're going to have to leave it for now. But I want to move on and talk a little bit about the influencer arena, because a study featured on eMarketer this past week, not by eMarketer, but featured on the site, looked at the neurological effects of influencer marketing on consumers. And while we always take studies with a grain of salt, the findings here are pretty remarkable. I mean, at the same time, Adam, this has been a terrible week for influencers, hasn't it? I mean, with the 7-year-old YouTuber Ryan Kaji, or I think that's how he pronounced his name, Kaji, facing an FTC investigation for deceptive advertising, the question becomes, yes, influencer marketing is ultra effective. We can take that away from this study, but is it effective for the wrong reasons? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you know what? I want to give kudos to the people who did this study, Neuro Insight, and I'm not sure if I'm saying the influencer agencies.
Yeah, it's one of the few studies I've seen where I'm going, wow, real science. This sounds like pretty cool what they did. Maybe I'm being caught up in the hype, but it sounds really cool.
I do a lot of research, and it's not that it's yes, it's real science. They had a real method to it, but the factors that they were studying were thought provoking to me. So that instead of just coming and saying, oh, it's more consumers prefer it or it's more effective, they really broke it down into categories: emotional intensity, memory encoding, and then there's a part on priming, which they had a different name, approaching how it impacts other advertising. And I just found that very thought-provoking approach. So kudos to them for that. And because of that, to answer your direct question, Bob, I think that the influencer marketing, first of all, is not new, right? We've been doing this going back to anytime you put a celebrity endorsement in. So however long that's been going on, probably the first famous caveman was a celebrity endorser for selling his kind of fire. But I don't think it is a new thing, but we tend to attack it like it's a new thing because of the way it is growing on each new platform that rises up. So we're looking at it a little bit differently. But because I see that it's effective in emotional intensity and memory encoding, and it outperforms or it improves the effects of television, Facebook, and YouTube, then I have to say I believe that when people are doing it right, it is an effective tool for the correct reasons. Now, the downside is, like anything, and I'm sure Dave and Joe are going to agree here, there can be charlatans that jump out of the woodwork for anything. So
let me caveat that real quickly here, because I've seen Ryan's toys or whatever.
I have too. Yeah, I mean, have kids around that age.
It really he's not doing anything, in my opinion, that's wrong. He's doing exactly textbook influencer marketing, and yet it can be conceived that this textbook approach to influencer marketing actually has an abnormal effect in terms of its influence over kids, and it's doing everything by the rules. As far as I can see, maybe there's something being broken here or there, but I mean, it's just like he's playing by the rules. His parents are keeping it in line with the rules.
And he's not even his channel isn't what I think is wrong with influencer marketing. It's more adults that are selling their own feeds and their own media on other platforms like Instagram and those places that keep getting called out for not disclosing. But I agree with you.
Well, and that's my question. I mean, it's just like yeah, there are a lot of charlatans out there, and there's a lot of people gaming the system and trying to put forward the fact that they can get you all the downloads and likes and all the sales that they can generate from their audience, etc. And they break the rules constantly to make it look more organic, like they're somehow really using this product. But I mean, even when you play by the rules, is it too much? Is this opening up brands to all kinds of potential liability, or if not liability, at least bad sentiment, from the standpoint of influencer marketing is really at its heart about tricking a consumer into believing that this influencer is really into your product?
Well, it's a good question. And in the study, they separated size of audience for the influencers. So I had the same logical train of thought of, what's the threshold? And they looked at, what do they call them? Celebrities, micro, which is under 500K, and then macro, which is over 500K, but not a celebrity. And so how do we take a celebrity, quote unquote, influencer and break that away from, J-Lo appearing in a commercial, or Johnny Depp for cologne, which is every Father's Day, just constantly running. Why do we look at that as a different format than influencer marketing when that's 100% what it is? But we see that the micro influencers tend to have a greater success rate in many, many cases than celebrity. And the celebrity piece kind of snaps people out of it and makes them say, oh no, this is an ad. So the ethics of it, it's almost, the less they recognize it as an ad, the more it's effective. And the more it becomes a celebrity where they can read it as an endorsement, consumers start to back away from it and get suspicious.
Yeah, I think the FTC have to do a better job of communicating exactly what the rules are. I mean, I know that they have rules, of course, but I mean, as a blogger and social media person from, many years ago, I mean, if I had an affiliate link or some sort of paid promotion, I would always include a disclosure with that. So it was extremely clear. And then you see people doing something like this, whether it's, one of these fancy pants influencers, or whether it's, parents that are pimping their kids or whatever it is, which is kind of how I feel about this one. It really irks me that it isn't clear that it's a paid promotion, paid sponsorship, and that has to be disclosed.
No, that's fair. I look at a channel like Ryan's Toys. Kids and parents go to that channel looking to watch that kid unbox toys or play with toys. Mm-hmm. So a kid may not, but a kid just can't. That's marketing to children is a totally different category, influencer or otherwise. But an adult should know that when I go to that page, what the deal that I'm making with Ryan's Toys. I think it's other times where it shows up in, like I said, social feeds, or even other YouTube channels where they don't disclose and they're jumping from product to product.
But I don't believe it's adults who are watching Ryan's channel. That's a thing. Like, I think it really is geared towards for children to watch. So, where, adults, like as a parent myself, I would read reviews and things and consumer reviews of products and toys before I get them for my kids, perhaps. But I mean, these videos are, quickly edited. I mean, as an adult, like watching them, it makes me dizzy. But they're totally geared towards children and made for children. So, and to me, it's just kind of it's just not right in that way. I mean, if they were doing it in a way just to share Ryan, how cute he is, and all the great things that and not to speak poorly to the kid, because of course he's just being used by his parents in this case. But I think. We will say allegedly he's being used by his parents, because I don't want to be sued. But you go ahead.
Right. That's the implication of the Verge article. That
Ryan is 8 or 9 years old, and I think the terms of service with YouTube are probably 13 up. So if it's parents putting the videos up there, then it's their responsibility, right?
Yeah, ultimately. I love how they were saying that Ryan Kaji was being investigated. I'm like, come on, the 7-year-old's not being investigated for anything.
I watched, I was researching this story too, and I watched some videos from like some news programs, and it wasn't that long ago that they didn't even disclose his last name. Like the parents intentionally did not disclose his last name or their last name for privacy concerns, and at some point, I guess that name slipped out. So I found that interesting.
Bob, I had a question for you. You know, the original way that you threw this to me, you said, is it effective for the right reason or the wrong reasons? And just out of curiosity, how would you reframe it to say that influencer marketing is effective for what are the right reasons in your mind?
Well, the right reasons are that advocacy is the number one thing that we want out of any kind of long-term relationship from any customer. So if someone is obviously into our product and we can come to an arrangement with them to endorse our product, either by giving them free product or by paying them to become an endorser, depending on the kind of relationship you want to set up. I mean, I think that's a legitimate way to market. You know, if someone is legitimately into your product and is recommending it honestly and wholeheartedly on behalf of the fact that they like this product, that's okay. It sounds good. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that, you know, I'm even fine with the whole thing about keeping it organic. I mean, you know, I do endorsements for products. I believe in the products that I offer, but I also do them as ads. I do them clearly as live reads. I don't put it in line with my content in some kind of sneaky way. Mm-hmm. For me, that's another aspect of influencer marketing that gets really, you know, kind of gray area-ish, where you're starting to try to hide it, and it's trying to be totally native. And I think that's not effective, nor is it fair. You need to be very clear that this is an ad, these are my sponsors, and I want to tell you about them because I believe in this product, and this is why I believe in this product. And you got to make it your own.
I have to tell you.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was gonna say, like, it's so incredible, this topic, because you know, the hypocrisy and the double standards, you know, of influence either being looked at and evaluated through the lens of, you know, celebrity and mass reach, but then recognizing the lack of disclosure with these mass reach and these celebrity endorsements, and even just product placement and branded entertainment, where the sum total of disclosure is small print that scrolls up very quickly at the end of the program where no one's watching. And you know, it just made me think, and Dave, you're going to get a kick out of this. I'm on my blog, April 29th, 2007, with a post that says Nikon D80 blogger outreach rocks. When Nikon sent me a camera, a beautiful camera, and I blogged about it. And I got, was it Strumpet, I think? I got taken to the, you know, to the cleaners because, by the way, I disclosed, right? The last thing it says, and remember, I said it twice, with full disclosure, I got this from Nikon and the agency MWW. But why was I taken to task? Because they were like, who is Jaffe? Jaffe's not a photographer. He's not credible. You know, he has no business or basis to be taking photos or talking about a camera. So at that point, which is so incredible, right? The disclosure was there in the early days of influencer marketing, and we were the pioneers. We were being schooled because, you know, we were not thought of as being even credible, you know, and so here we are. Who cares whether they're a customer or not, whether they're credible or not? We still can't even get the damn disclosure right. So, you know, on the one hand, there's the hypocrisy and the contradiction, right? Comparing it to the incumbent. On the other hand, we're like, come on, why are we still screwing up on the basics? It's incredible.
And Joe, even earlier in the conversation, you referenced the episode of Mad Men when they talked about Kodak. Like, I actually do not know the answer to this. Was that product placement, or was that just part of a clever storyline?
Oh, Kodak
couldn't afford that.
Yeah,
I think Kodak was out of business.
Yeah, I think Kodak was out of business. Yeah.
But you know,
maybe insolvent, but still in business.
Yeah. Can I tell you what I always used to say? Like, and this is again back in the day, which is a great example of brand entertainment or product placement is when you go, wait, was that paid for? There's no way that was paid for. That was paid for. So it's because it's so beautifully woven into the story that it just feels normal and natural. And I think, you know, when we kind of, you know, put a bow on this topic, that's the real insight that we should be sharing with all the agencies and all the brands and even the influencers out there, which is when it's natural and organic and normal, it has a much better chance of passing that kind of smell test. And that doesn't mean it at all that disclosure, falls by the wayside. That has to be there too.
No, it's up to.
But we have to have a bit of common sense here. That's all.
And
it's got to be disclosed. I mean, but like just very quickly, Bob, like I used to work in the consumer electronics business, and I would send products for review to YouTubers and so forth, and tech bloggers and so forth. But I would always add, like, please give us your, as you do the unboxing or what have you, give us your honest feedback. And please disclose that we sent this to you, like for free of charge. So we weren't paying for it, but we would send whatever the products were for free. But, it's the same thing of like asking people for 5-star reviews. You can't do that. You can ask people for reviews, but to ask them for a 5-star review is a little sneaky there. So.
And we need to remember, I mean, not only are there ethics to keep in mind, I mean, the results of this study make influencer marketing probably one of the most effective, most useful tools out there in the toolbox. So we got to figure out a way to use it as ethically as possible. I mean, some of these studies points, Adam, like most effective for impact, most effective for emotional recall, best primer for other ad media. And I think that for me, that was the killer aspect of influencer marketing, that influencer marketing not only is highly memorable and highly effective, but it's also really good about setting you up for your TV campaign or for your social media outreach or whatever else you're doing. When you do that, you're going to be that much more visible to the people who are exposed to the influencer impact.
Yeah, I agree. And what was already discussed is when it feels seamless and when it feels like it makes sense for A, the brand, B, the influencer, and C, the consumer, when everybody's getting a lift from it, then it's great. That's the right reason. When it feels
and also, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
No, I think you're about to say what I was going to say anyway. So
yeah, it's like when we shoehorn it in, I think what practitioners of marketing object to is when it's poorly done, when it's shoehorned in, when the feed gets just jam-packed full of hawking product. Ugh, it's gross.
Yeah, when it feels icky. If it feels icky, don't do it.
Yeah, icky is the exact word that I was holding back. But yeah, it just doesn't. That's when marketers say, "Oh, I don't like this influencer, area. Just doesn't feel like a place that I want to be." But when it's well done, we all scratch our head and say, "Wow, how did they? That's amazing. That's such a well done, piece of marketing."
Right.
Well, moving on, I want to talk about AI. We've all had a very similar experience to the one I'm about to describe. You deal with a phone response system, a voice response system on the phone, and you wind up yelling at it to give you a real person because you're just totally frustrated by the phone tree you're going through. Or you call Siri an idiot because it can't answer your question. Or you seethe quietly as that chatbot wastes your time with inane responses and doesn't really get to the heart of your problem. Joe, we all know that AI and voice are important paths of the marketing landscape. I mean, these are really some of the most amazing innovations going on today. But in this interim phase of AI development, are we also creating lasting negative brand experiences by relying on it too much? What are your thoughts about going all in on AI and voice response systems at this early stage?
Well, the first thing I did was I put my Alexa into do not disturb mode because she's got a big mouth, let me tell you. She talks back all the time. And it's driving me crazy. Oh wait, I just fell into the trap again. This topic, in one of the source articles defines a couple of very interesting discussion areas, and it really is on it's psychology and human dynamics. And so on the one hand, the article talks about our children swearing and screaming, or even us, right, screaming at Siri or Google or Alexa when they don't get it, or when they don't answer our question, and it gets frustrating. And the question is, well, are they going to take that language, the fact that they're insulting or screaming or swearing or talking back, at this bot, into the real world and in terms of how they talk to people of authority or teachers. There's that. The other part of the article, which I thought was also interesting, is that, when we design these interfaces, we should be mindful of not assigning generalizations or stereotypes or certain personality, attributes to, a male versus a female, an older voice versus a younger voice. So in keeping with biases. And I just think, we were discussing this before, we're literally at the dawn of a whole new way to communicate. And these are exciting times, but we should be mindful of how much growth and how much evolution, how many learnings we're going to get. I will say on the flip side, I love listening to my kids, my youngest in particular, trying to find and uncover the Easter eggs. I think the one of the most hysterical ones is if you ask Siri what 0 divided by 0 is, and I won't go into that. So I actually think that there is a surprise and a delight aspect, the Easter eggs, that counterbalances the "I'm sorry, I don't understand," or "I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question yet," and maybe they balance each other out.
In a certain sense, I get what you're saying. From an interim stage of the technology, it's nice to have a little humor to give some balance and some perspective to the experience. It's still pretty much a toy in a lot of ways. It's something to play with. It's not something to definitely rely on 100% for every single need. But on those times when it fails us dramatically, and the way that we react so poorly to these devices, it's not just about the way we're treating this feminine voice or this masculine voice and how we're getting into all kinds of gender stereotyping and weird things like that. That's troubling enough. But from a standpoint of as a brand, if you put yourself in that position, is there going to be a lasting impact on your brand? I mean, Adam, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's just like, are you going to create this experience that's going to have this lasting negative impact on your brand equity because you put yourself way out there in the voice category before the voice is able to give you the intelligence you need in order to perform at a level that's adequate for your brand experience that you're trying to create with the consumer?
Yeah, I look no further than the device that is on the floor next to me here, my Apple iPhone, on which I have Siri, that has performed so poorly for me that it hurts my feelings about the brand that I've been using since the early 90s. Almost every product they come out with, I go get. When Siri came out, it's not that Siri is a bad product, but it doesn't perform to the level now that Alexa does, or that even Hey Google, if I say that. Hey Google is usually correct because Google has trained me in how to use Google and how to use Google Voice in that same straight line. But if I go one more time and ask Siri for the score of the Yankees game and it takes me to Wikipedia to a Civil War page, I'm going to go to Infinite Loop and start spray painting the windows there. It's insane how bad that is and what that makes me feel about that brand that has such this holy shine on it. So over time, that's a big example, but there's so many examples of chat bots and things that are ineffective where they say, oh, chat here instead of being on hold. But then you burn that same amount of time asking questions and realizing 3 back and forths in that, oh, this is a robot that cannot answer my specific question about my account or my issue.
Dave, I'd love your thoughts on it. I'd love your thoughts on this because, Joe posited something really interesting, this idea of you balance it out with fun, you balance it out with humor. Is that the secret of this interim phase of trying to create great brand experiences with a technology that's not quite up to it? And I'm not just talking about Siri and Alexa. I'm talking about chatbots. I'm talking about voice interaction systems when you're calling a telephone hotline. I mean, do you need that humor in order to make people understand this is not a serious technology? You shouldn't take it too serious. Have fun.
I like the idea that, of course, it depends on the type of business and the type of customers who are calling that business or interacting with that business. A law firm, maybe not quite as much, but I do see where a sense of humor would definitely take it further and just having some fun with it. Side note, when I call my bank, which will remain nameless, 9 times out of 10, I'm put on hold for at least 10 minutes. And I have to press a series of numbers like we have all done in voicemail hell. But what the kicker is they have a recorded message that loops every 30 seconds or so, reminding me of the customer service awards the bank has won. I kid you not. It's horrible. And for me, like with the whole idea of this in a customer service sort of setting is, I think, first and foremost, as a business, you have to decide, if you are getting and especially with AI and automation in general, is if you are being inundated with calls or inquiries and so forth, then I think it's fine to invest in this. But I mean, at the same time, if your phone's not ringing off the hook constantly, I think we can handle this as humans most of the time for most businesses. So, and I think, you look at, now I do some work with Google My Business and so forth. So full disclosure there, but Google My Business has, and like Facebook as well, has like a messaging option so that customers can actually message you directly and like text you, and you can text back. And I think that's a fine way, because most people nowadays don't want to call a business, of course, right? You'd rather message them and just get a reply really quickly. So I think something like that, but again, it's a human touch. There's a live person on the other end. But as far as the AI thing goes, I mean, I find it pretty fascinating. But I do agree with Joe. I think adding a sense of humor into the interaction would be worthwhile. But just don't overdo it with it. Get the person, if it's just the initial engagement, get them to a human when you can.
But you see, what you're doing right there is exactly honing in on the opportunity, but also the pitfalls, which all of these purveyors in this category should be doing. First of all, you're equating this with customer service and customer experience, which is exactly right. But the real question is, what are we benchmarking, these solutions against? The sad reality is that they're being benchmarked against these IVR systems, right? Your call is important to us and will be answered in the order it was received.
Right.
Like due to an unusually unexpected high call volume, your call will be answered in 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I'm like, but you just told me I was important to you. So
why don't you just tell me the movie you've chosen?
So the challenge here is, if we are creating these as ways to cut costs and save a buck and basically boost our bottom line, then we are going to be bucketed in with IVR. But if we actually compare and contrast with surprise and delight and true exceptional custom experience, well, then we're probably going to invest a little bit more money. And that's why when you hear, I think Apple does a good job of it, but when you hear, I am an intelligent bot, or I can respond to complete sentences, which is what Apple's does, and you actually like string a couple of sentences together, it's quite a pleasant surprise how accurate the response is. Whereas when you look at so many solutions, including some of these, voice assistants, there is an overpromise and sadly an underdelivery.
I remember reading, I think it was like a 2017 article in NME about, and actually I never did try this, but where you are put on hold, if you start just swearing, it automatically detects those curse words or those swear words and then expedites you over to like a live.
I discovered that. I discovered that miracle in the early aughts. I mean, it's just like you just drop the F-bomb and suddenly I'll get you to an operator right now. So now I just go on, I say F until I get my operator.
Sauce. That's the secret sauce of great customer service now, sadly, is you've got to like just start cursing.
Well, I want to move on to our final topic of the evening. We're running out of time. Forbes reminds us this week of the old adage, when times are good, we should advertise, but when times are bad, we must advertise. With growing talk of an impending recession, Dave, why is it important to plan now to maintain, if not grow, your ad spend should the economy nosedive? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I found some really interesting. I read an interesting article from the Times of London from February '08 by John Quelch, and he was talking about some different tips and reasons why you should be advertising still, for the most part. It is especially easy for low-cost brands like Walmart and JetBlue, of course. He said companies targeting the middle segment of the market will face the most difficulties. He said the pressure for proven returns on marketing expenditures will increase. Trusted brands are especially valued, and they can still launch new products successfully, but interest in new brands and new categories may fade. So, but what I was reading from the article that you sent along too, there's a lot of reasons why you should still be advertising. It's almost like investing. When you wait, when the market goes down, it's like, don't pull out, wait, give it time. But some reasons include like the noise level is lowered with less competition because people do get spooked and they pull out. Brands can project image of corporate stability. The spend is lower because direct mail sales growth increases during recessions. So there's a lot of good reasons. And then this article also had some interesting stories and real case studies and examples, or brief case studies of like the dry cereal companies in the 20s and how Kellogg's increased spend while Post cut their spends. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that one in particular really got me.
Yeah, profits grew 30% for Kellogg's.
Right, and Post has never recovered. And I think that's the bigger story here than anything. Yeah. It's not just good for your business, it's good for your long-term prospects. I mean, it's not a short-term solution to advertise during a downturn. It's something that can potentially change the order of who's dominant in a marketplace just because you're putting that ad spend out there and projecting an image of strength.
Right. I mean, even in the 90s, Pizza Hut and Taco Bell increased and McDonald's decreased ad spends. And then Pizza Hut increased sales by 61% and Taco Bell 40% and McDonald's declined 28%. So right there, another example of why I think you do need to stay the course. Maybe, changing your strategy perhaps based on, the state of the economy. But I think especially with trusted brands, it's important to keep on going.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how DTC brands that have, that category has really blown up over the last 5, 6, 7 years. I'll be interested to see how those brands approach a recession. We may already be in it, who knows? But how they change their approach and their look at cost per acquisition as a brand building and an advertising expense in a recession environment.
I mean, I could probably respond to that part, which is, they are so performance driven and so data and analytic and driven that everything will still be benchmarked against that. It's almost to their detriment that they are actually, even though the brands themselves are become consumer darlings, they're actually extremely, tactical and performance driven. But the only spanner in the works that I would throw into this conversation is, and I remember one of the white papers, one of the seminal white papers on this. I remember when I was at Shy Day looking at it and going through it, and this was just post the .com bubble bursting. But none of the case studies, we haven't had a recession, I guess, since 2007 circa, right? But we don't have any current case studies. And I just wonder whether the rules are different or the same for the next one that we go into. Because, the argument is about clutter and it's about, projecting confidence, etc. But there's just so much more complexity and so much more change and disruption in the market that I don't know even that this. I don't know. I'm asking this question in an open-ended fashion. I don't know that this hypothesis will necessarily apply.
Well, Adam puts forward the DTC example. I mean, DTC is disrupting so much of the marketplace. I mean, your ads may be completely invisible. If you keep your spend up, it may not be as palatable to the audience. I mean, there may be all kinds of factors coming into play that weren't there before. It's a really good point, Joe. Are you going to say something, Dave?
I was just going to mention, like in the article, it talked about ad spend dropping 13% in 2008 after last recession, and it broke down by newspaper. Like newspapers was negative 27%, but online was only negative 2%. Right. So curious how those numbers would compare. The article obviously quotes radio, magazines, out of home, and TV as well in there, but TV and online took the least hit. So I'd be curious to see, what that number would be like, especially with online.
So I guess the answer is, in a downturn, you must advertise cautiously and judiciously.
Yes, that's right.
It doesn't sound as snappy a headline.
It doesn't, but it's probably more realistic. Well, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with Dave Delaney. You can find him at Future4th. It's future4th.com, or is it .co?
.com.
.com. So future4th.com. That's the consultancy where he works and provides his many clients with all kinds of great wisdom. So tell us what's going on in your world, Dave. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, thank you. I've been doing a lot of speaking, and I've got a presentation that's been increasingly becoming more and more popular. It's called the Master Communicator Secret Weapon. It's a keynote or a breakout presentation about using my secret weapon. I'll tell you guys right now, it's improv comedy. But it's how to use improv to improve the way you communicate.
You're not the first person I've heard say that. I mean, you're not the first. David Spark comes on all the time. It must be something to do with the name David, but David Spark comes on, and he's an old time improv comic and stand up comic and everything before he got into the business. So
I studied at Second City in Toronto, and then had an improv troupe in Ireland when I lived in Ireland, and actually recently, last couple of years, started performing improv again with a troupe here in Nashville. It's been doing this presentation and actually I have an improv workshop that I do called the Communication Mastery, which you can find on the site as well. But doing these workshops, I just did it for FedEx a couple of weeks ago, and the feedback was just astounding. So this is definitely my shameless plug, with something I'm extremely excited about. The feedback's been awesome, and I'd love to tell your listeners more about it.
Fascinating. Well, if anybody has the need for something like that, please get in touch with Dave. Next up, we have Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at the HMS Beagle. That's the home of the consultancy he founded with Lynn Power. And she's providing insight and opportunities for brands so that they won't suck anymore. So tell us what's going on in your world, Joe. What would you like to promote?
You said it so beautifully and eloquently, especially that word "suck." I love it. I'm doing a ton of travel over the next 2+ months, and 3 presentations or 3 conferences in particular. So if any BeanCast listeners are going to be in the cities and want to meet up, September I'm going to be keynoting at Brand Manage Camp in Las Vegas. That's September 16th to 18th. October, I'm keynoting, very excited about this, at ANA's Masters of Marketing. That's in Orlando.
That's a big event. That's a really big event.
It's a bucket list item for me, where I'll be telling the entire marketing community they suck. And that's going to be, I just cat off that. That's Orlando, 2nd to 5th. And then, just because life really sucks for me right now, I will be in Trinidad and Tobago, and that's in October for the Custom Experience Caribbean Summit. So if anyone happens to be in those 3 markets during that time, that's October 24th, and you want to hang out with me and have a drink, and I would love to. It would give me tremendous pleasure to connect with any BeanCast listeners out there.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And yes, your life does sound like it sucks, Joe. I'm really, very sad for you. Last but not least, Adam Pierno. You can find him at adampierno.com. That's the home of everything that is personal and important to him, his opportunities for speaking engagements, his book, anything you want to do. So tell us what's going on in your world, Adam. What would you like to promote?
Oh, I just hang out. I don't have a lot. No, I'm kidding. I have actually, Bob, I have 2 books. And right now, because of how moved I've been about the fires in the Amazon, I am taking proceeds from both of those books and donating it all to Amazon Watch, and trying to partner to find ways to address what's happening with the indigenous peoples in that fire. On the commercial side, I am still trying to ruthlessly commercialize myself through speaking and other things that I am not donating, and I will be doing that in an ongoing fashion as well.
Yeah, it's really great stuff. So you should check it out and definitely give Adam a call if you need any advice, help, or someone to speak at your next event.
Thanks
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, I'm going to go to Adam on this one. For the launch of Mario Kart on mobile devices, TBWA Chiat Day created an amazing, and I am really excited about this TV commercial that is both effective in communicating the fun of the game and in being a fan service for the brand faithful. I love how many Easter eggs there were in this ad and how the experience of watching the ad felt like you were racing. It was really a well done TV commercial, and I don't say that very often.
I am not very often as effusive in my praise. Do you know how rare it is that my 9-year-old son and I are both delighted by the same video product? We were delighted, and we watched it 20 times in a row together and pointed and found the Easter eggs and sang the song. So we had a great time watching it.
Okay, nobody else is going to jump in and say express their Nintendo love.
Yeah, I love an Easter. I'm a sucker for an Easter egg, man. So yeah, and the ad is brilliant. And slipping. I mean, the ad alone, like without the Easter eggs, is a great spot. It's just awesome. But adding those Easter eggs in there, I mean, I love an Easter egg. The best thing with Easter eggs I find is when there's like a phone number or a website and you actually pause it and you find the number and then you call it, like Better Call Saul in Breaking Bad. Like all those numbers and websites were real. So I love that stuff.
You're talking to a guy who actually, in the original adventure on Atari, went through the effort of finding the microdot and unlocking the special room. I mean, we're talking like a serious Easter egg fan. So I agree with you. I understand where you're coming from, Dave. Next up, the bad of the week. Another day, another leak for Facebook. This time, Joe, 147 million of our phone numbers matched to name, gender, and even more details about our personal life was found on an open, non-password protected server. Security experts are assuming, based on the fact of how highly sensitive this data was, that it was probably put there by an employee who was just trying to take the database home to work on it on an open server. You're not really thinking about it.
I mean, it's just at this point, it just goes from bad to worse. And I think the only solace that we can have is that at some point, just everything is just going to be out there. So it will be like, just hope you get lucky. It's like, right, listen, I could win the lottery, or someone might just find my password and wipe me out of my life savings. I'll take the good with the bad. I don't know.
And they're really,
it's sad.
I was just going to say, and they're really, 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 really sorry, and it won't happen again.
Won't happen again. I'm just started typing in random IP addresses and seeing what treasure trove of data I found from Facebook.
My number is published everywhere, so I'm not really too concerned about this. Finally, the ugly of the week. We're going to go to Dave on this one. In the latest high-profile example of ageism in the agency world, TBWA's Media Arts Lab, TBWA was both the good and the ugly for this week, TBWA's Media Arts Lab, which is the Apple agency, fired a 30-year career creative veteran of the shop because they couldn't carry his salary any longer. This is as close to a quote as I could get from looking at the news articles. They wouldn't even negotiate with him. He is obviously suing them now. Dave, I mean, our business is so incredibly ageist. It gets worse and worse and worse. I suppose it's more, in my face because I'm older, but at the same time, this is just crazy to be able to say to a 30-year veteran, we can't carry your salary anymore, and not even negotiate with him about maybe getting a lesser salary or something to keep him around.
Yeah. First of all, this is why I work for myself. I can't let myself go, or hopefully not anyway. But in this case, I mean, this gentleman, and I don't have his name in front of me, I apologize, but this gentleman came up with the original iPod, like the shadow ads that everybody saw, I mean, everybody knew those ads, the silhouette ads, I should say. Like he is a genius with the content that he's created over the years. And he was a close friend of Steve Jobs also, according to the article.
Handpicked by Lee Clow to take this position. I mean, he's got some pedigree.
Absolutely. And to be honest, if I was another agency, I would be jumping at the opportunity of hiring him. So I would say that for, as well. But yeah, it's a shame that, I don't know the full details, but from what I read about it, it's just such a shame to lose just such an incredibly talented gentleman. So hopefully he'll land on his feet somewhere lucky.
Well, have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online using the hashtag GBU. That's #GBU. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week with our special sex episode. It's going to be pretty amazing, talking about sex and sexual technology and sexual wellness and all the problems that this industry faces in selling these products into the marketplace. Hope you'll join us for that. And if you stayed long enough to hear this, I'm really excited because you got to hear this Easter egg that I've dropped into the end of my show.
Wow. Adam, Dave, should we be insulted that we weren't asked to be on this episode?
No,
I think it's ages.
I know why I wasn't invited.
All right. Well, hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.